Hello, welcome to the Vertical Drop Viking. I'm Josef. Today I want to talk to you about my home park, Michigan's Adventure. We'll go over a brief history of the park, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, share some of my worries about the future, and my hopes for how things can improve. Michigan's Adventure, like many of the parks now operating under the Cedar Fair Six Flags umbrella, started out as a regional theme park. It first opened its doors as Deer Park in 1956. For the first 2 years of its operation, the entirety of the park was a storybook-themed playground and a petting zoo. The park opened its first ride in 1958. That was a miniature train. First flat rides came in 1972 when the park was renamed Deer Park Funland. Now, the Spider flat ride that was introduced in 1976 was actually taken down after only 11 years of operating into the park and sold to Michael Jackson in 1987. Deer Park Funland opened its first roller coaster in 1979, an Aero Standard Corkscrew, one that was still giving janky but thrilling rides in 2025 and possibly beyond. My son and I got a chance to ride it on closing day 2025, and I personally thought it was much smoother in the front row than Cedar Point's similar Aero Looper. The pre-drop gives you a fun little kick of forward G's, and then after the drop, it's a turn, a corkscrew, and you're back home. This is me and my son in the front row. In 1988, the park changed management, and with that came the name change to the one that it's known by today, Michigan's Adventure. And a little aside for any national or international viewers, here in the Great Lakes region, we have a little idiosyncratic habit of adding an S to the end of some brand names, even though there isn't one. We call our regional chain of grocery stores Myers, even though the brand name is Meyer. We call Burlington Coat Factory Burlingtons. We call JCPenney Pennies. And this strange habit has been transposed onto this brand name in a big way. I would venture a guess as to say that within the state of Michigan, more than 40% of people think this place is called Michigan's Adventures. The possessive S in Michigan's, there's not an S in Adventure. The possessive S that's supposed to be in the brand name is confusing to tourists and outsiders, and then the waters are muddied even further when the locals add a second S where there isn't supposed to be one. But back on topic, Michigan's Adventure. The new management hired Charles Summers to design them a new wooden roller coaster, Wolverine Wildcat, and hired the Din Corporation to build it. This partnership would famously go on to build 9 more wooden roller coasters, 3 of which are now some of the country's best RMC hybrids. Now, these wooden roller coasters in their original state are extremely rough. I remember being 12 or 13 when I rode Wolverine Wildcat first, and even at that age, I knew something was wrong with the thing. Even if I didn't know nearly enough about roller coasters, physics, or biology to begin to explain what was wrong with it. The profiling is wonky, the transition into those profiles is janky, and it jackhammers you pretty hard in the valleys. Martin and Vlaminx has been working on retracking it, but I'm still of the opinion that this coaster doesn't have much time left in its current state. I'm not even certain that they'd consider RMCing it in earnest. With only an 85-foot lift hill, it would be smaller even than the Medusa Steel Coaster. The double out and back layout would be fun to work with for RMC, but I'm not sure that Six Flags is willing to spend the money on this park, and we'll talk more about that later. In 1989, I was introduced, and so was the gondola wheel, as well as a couple other flat rides. The next year, they opened the water park, Wild Water Adventure, and it saw significant investment and expansion over the coming years. Unlike a lot of parks, the water park in Michigan's Adventure is basically enclosed by the amusement park, rather than separate from it. An admission to the front gate gets you into the water park as well. This was the source for their long-running 2 parks for the price of 1 ad campaign, which was ubiquitous on Michigan TV and radio throughout the 90s. Zach Zoomer opened in 1994. It's a CCI Junior wooden coaster, which is not nearly as rough as Wolverine Wildcat. The trains are painfully small for someone my size. When I took my son on this ride as his first real coaster, I was crammed in like biscuits in a can. and the ride operator probably should have disqualified me, but instead he just looked sorry for me and sent me on my way. The Zack Zoomer is a good, fun coaster, especially for a kid's first thrill ride. This partnership with CCI would seem to be an omen of good things to come when construction began on Shivering Timbers in 1997. When it opened in 1998, it put the park on the map for coaster fans. Now, this is one of my favorite roller coasters ever. Even if I ride 100 Woodies, this will be the one that made me fall in love with them. I had ridden Blue Streak, Gemini, and the Wolverine Wildcat before I ever touched this one, and while they were enjoyable in their own rights, none of them were quite like Shivering Timbers. I think that Airtime Thrill said it best when he described this coaster as a B&M Hyper made out of wood. This coaster is just airtime, 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 half a helix, airtime, 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 and you're back home after a full helix. The coaster just launches you into the sky over and over and over again. Now, it's been showing its age lately, but they've been smoothing out sections with Titan Track, piece by piece, and so far it seems like they're winning the battle. It'll be interesting to see if they keep making this incremental investment into Shivering Timbers, or if they decide to do something more drastic. After 1998, there was the addition of another kid coaster, the Big Dipper, as well as one of the more beloved Wild Mouse coasters in the Midwest. Just watch out for that last break, because it'll give you and your kids both whiplash if you're not ready. And then, after that, as far as coaster nerds are concerned, nothing. The park was in talks with Morgan to design them a hyper coaster to compete with Magnum XL. Cedar Fair bought the park, canceled that Morgan Hyper, added an upcharge flat ride in the form of the Ripcord, which is a sky swing, moved the Swan boats from Maverick's Heartline turned S-Curve Pond into Michigan's Adventures Pond, and then eventually moved Geauga Lake's Vekoma SLC to the north side of the Swan Lake Pond. And that is the last major investment in this park, all the way back in 2008. A relocated Vekoma suspended looper. They've added one flat ride since then, but it's for kids. And since then, this place has just been aging. In 2022, the park joined its sister park in Cedar Point and extending the season to Halloween, theming the park in spooky autumn decor and introducing haunted attractions. This only continued through the 2024 season. Although the reason for ending the Fall Festival in 2025 was not given publicly, I have a hypothesis or two. And that brings us to today. Six Flags and Cedar Fair are one company and have been one company for an entire summer season. The results are, so far, looking pretty scary for the new super chain. Attendance was below their projected levels basically across the country, and when sales performance doesn't meet expectations, shareholders start selling their stocks. This gives the company less money to work with, which has a negative impact on the parks, which has a negative impact on the customers who spend less money at those parks, which has a negative impact on the company. You can see how this becomes a feedback loop very quickly. And Six Flags is in a bit of a tailspin right now in an attempt to correct this. They've already announced the permanent closure of Six Flags America in Maryland, which is a move that surprised a lot of people. Six Flags America must have just been absolutely bleeding money if the huge corporation thinks it's smarter to completely wash its hands of it than to try and make any more money out of it. If you look at the rides of Six Flags America, it's not impossible to imagine that the maintenance cost for these coasters was starting to get steep. Six Flags America had 8 coasters that were over 21 years old. Another Din Woody, another Vekoma suspended looper, a GCI Woody, a B&M floorless that was not only converted from a stand-up but moved across the country after originally being built and operating in Illinois, and a Wild Mouse that was built and operated in Illinois and was moved across the country. All of these coasters were old enough to where replacement talks had to have at least been on the table. And that is a lot of replacements to talk about at once. Now, if we take that logic and we apply it to my home park over here, Michigan's Adventure could be in a lot of trouble. It's in the exact same boat as Six Flags America was. It has no new rides that are reliable and cheap to maintain. It's got many old rides that are getting more expensive to maintain as the years tick by. And it's been owned and operated by the same company as Six Flags America all year now. I visited the park on its last day of operations in 2025, and I have to say that it felt like Six Flags has already started to pack it in on Michigan's adventure. The line to park was backed up a long way. Only two of the kiosks were open. Only one of the kiosks had a person working inside, the leftmost one. The other one was digital only, all the way over on the right. Why the other several digital kiosks weren't open, I can't say, but it would have done a lot to alleviate the backup here. Someone about 3 or 4 cars ahead of us had trouble with their parking pass, and the gate would not open for them, and they walked back and forth twice between the rightmost and leftmost kiosks, trying to ask the attendant for help. Whatever the attendant told them clearly did not help them. Eventually, a lady behind me in line got out of her car, ran up to the kiosk, and scanned her gold pass and got the Stuck family out of everyone's way and freed us up to go in. We found a parking spot in the row straight out from Mad Mouse's lift hill, quite nearly to the end of the lot, and after a short hike, we were inside. There was a decent wait for the Mad Mouse, but my son wanted to warm up on a calmer coaster, so we waited in line for about 40 minutes for the Mad Mouse. We accidentally found ourselves at first in the special access line, which is the exit line. We turned around and went back and got into the regular line. And after about 25-30 minutes in the regular line, the young couple in front of us bailed, and we were still 10-15 minutes back. We then saw that young couple that was in front of us go through the special access line and just get on the ride, no questions asked. So I guess those are the pitfalls of being honest. They had 3 cars on the track. Only one of them was ever between the lift hill and the final brake run at any given time. One car was always at the station. One car was always stuck on the brake run staring at the station. I know I mentioned it before. This final brake run on the Mad Mouse is rough. There's nothing slowing you down before it, and it stops you on a dime. So if you have kids on the ride with you, hold on to your kids. If you're just on there for the credits, watch your neck. After this, we hiked up a little way. We rode the corkscrew. It was only operating one train. It was still a pretty short wait. My son and I lucked out, and we got offered to bump up ahead a few positions and take the front row so that the group in front of us could take the whole next train. I have to say I've ridden this Aero Looper as a teen, and I've ridden corkscrew at Cedar Point, both as a teen and as an adult, and I found this to be much, much smoother. And also, before I rode this ride, I never knew that the front row on Aero Loopers has leg room. I'm a very tall man. I like to say that I'm exactly as tall as the maximum height requirement on any ride, and not an inch taller, so please don't check. And this leg room on the front of an Aero Looper was a godsend. I will never ride another Aero Looper unless I can get that front spot and stretch my legs out. If you're over 6'2", 6'3" even, I would recommend waiting for that front row unless you see me in line behind you. I really enjoyed this ride. Everything I'd seen on Coaster YouTube before my most recent ride had me expecting it to beat me senseless, and it did. Speaking of Coaster YouTube bringing my expectations down, our next cue was for Thunderhawk. Now, if you've watched any of the many great roller coaster enthusiast channels here on YouTube, you're probably familiar with the hate that is heaped upon the Vekoma suspended looping coaster. If you're not familiar, short version of the story is that the company Vekoma took an idea that was innovated by another company, Bolliger and Mabillard. They ripped it off and they mass produced it. Vekoma came along and made the Pepsi to B&M's Coke, but in a market where the difference between buying a Coke and buying a Pepsi was $4 million. Every park in the 90s wanted an inverted coaster. They were all the rage. But only the cream of the crop could afford a B&M, and B&M could only make so many of theirs at once. So the SLC from Vekoma became far more prolific in turning up at every regional park that could afford any roller coaster, while the B&M inverted remained more elusive, like a legendary beast that had to be sought out. I think the SLC deserves its own video, but for now, I'll come back to where I started this tangent, and that's that coaster nerds hate the SLC. It's everywhere, and it's not as good as a B&M inverted. Therefore, it is bad. And I went into this ride, Thunderhawk, my very first SLC, expecting it to be just as bad as Coaster Tube told me it would be. I went in expecting a painful restraint, janky transitions, and a rough ride. And Thunderhawk was fine. My only other inverted coasters have been Raptor and Wicked Twister, and Thunderhawk was certainly no Raptor. But I thought it was way more fun than Wicked Twister by a long shot. Perhaps that's not a fair comparison, as Wicked Twister isn't a full circuit coaster, but still, Thunderhawk was fun. I'm a sucker for big looping Immelmans, and I like dive loops, and the SLC throws two of them at you in a row right after the first drop. I thought the layout was honestly great. Obviously, when you hold the Thunderhawk up to a B&M invert, it comes up short in a lot of places, but Michigan's Adventure is conspicuously absent of any other strong steel coasters at all, much less a B&M invert. And I'm certain that that logic applies to a lot of other regional parks in the country that proudly still run their SLCs. In any case, I didn't bang my head on the shoulder restraints. It didn't shake me up. I had a very smooth ride on the Thunderhawk the second time that I queued for it, because the first time we got all the way to the station and the ride went down, which was a huge bummer. They were running two trains. When we finally got back in line later that afternoon and rode it, the operations were pretty slow on those two trains. When we got back to the brake run, the other train was still loading, and we sat there for quite a while on the brake run, staring at the station again. Staffing on this day seemed incredibly thin, and they were struggling to get these trains dispatched, even with the thin crowds. We went to one of the drink stations, but it was closed. There was a trash can pushed in front of the line to block it off. So we headed to Shivering Timbers, one of my favorites, but it was closed for testing when we got there. So we doubled back and went to the water park for a bit. We rode two of the slides. The lines for those slides was somewhat long, especially for the capacity they were putting through. We finished the water park at 5, went to another drink station, found it closed, another trash can blocking it off. We got our Thunderhawk adventure out of the way, and then that was it. The park had been advertised as being open until 7 when I purchased the tickets, but at 6, the loudspeaker started announcing that the park was now closing. I asked a nearby security guard, and she said, 6 now, and shrugged and walked away. The season was over, the fall festival was canceled, and that was that. What Michigan's Adventure does right. This park is great for smaller kids. Big Dipper, Woodstock Express, not that one, not that one, that one, and the Zach Zoomer are both great beginner coasters that got my older son hooked on coasters at half the age that I did. I can't speak for the entirety of the country, but here in the Midwest, Cedar Point and Six Flags Great America don't have nearly the same selection of flat rides and exciting rides that are specifically for kids, ranging from the most basic thrill rides up to solid kids coasters. Cedar Point has Camp Snoopy, Woodstock Express, the Blue Streak, with very little in between. Great America has Sprocket Rockets, Little Dipper, and Whizzer, which are all pretty daunting ride for the youngest park goers. Michigan's Adventure just offers more for families with very young kids, especially when you factor in that the entrance to the splash pad is a 3-minute walk from the entrance to Thunderhawk. What Michigan's Adventure does wrong, at least this time. Honestly, it felt like every corner that could be cut on this closing day was cut. If they could have funneled us in, taken our money, told us everything was closed, and funneled us out, I feel like they would have been happy to do so. And I feel like that level of disdain is a bad indicator of how the employees feel about the future of the park. While we were on the second water slide, my baby and his lovely mother were sitting by the wave pool, and she said that when they started kicking the kids out of the wave pool at 5, they were outright yelling and screaming at people. Not a single drink station was open. I was not able to cash in my drink package all day. I ended up buying a syrupy lemonade from a vending machine in a slide line in an attempt to hydrate. After the machine had already taken my credit card, I learned that it was out of water. That's why I got the lemonade. It felt like the park was running on a skeleton crew and that the crew knew it. And I hope I'm wrong when I say it felt like the crew knew something we didn't. I don't say this from a Karen standpoint. I've been in the service industry, bar industry, and music industries for my entire adult life. I'm about as pro worker as you can get. I'm telling you by experience, these workers were not having a good time. Maybe they're just angry that the fall festival was canceled with a month's warning, which cut their summer gig in half. Maybe, but hopefully not, but maybe they know the park is facing the axe this off season and that their jobs could be gone regardless. The park's future feels very uncertain. So what's next for the park? What could turn it around? I think there are a few possible futures we could find ourselves in. The worst case scenario is that Six Flags will sell the park to someone who isn't interested in operating an amusement park. This could be a real estate developer, the Muskegon County Parks and Recreation Authority, really anyone else. The land is beautiful. The lake is cut off from all the pollution and gunk that plagues the shorelines of the Great Lakes by the bigger cities. Now, that would spell the end of our regional coaster park, and honestly, it doesn't seem like all that unlikely of an outcome. Now that Six Flags has literally come out and said publicly, we have too many parks, we're closing our low performing parks. And considering the amount of money that's gone into and come out of both Cedar Point to the east and Six Flags Great America to the west, it may be redundant for Six Flags to keep Michigan's Adventure open and counterintuitive for them to sell it to a potential competitor. That brings us to our second scenario. Six Flags could sell the park to someone who is interested in operating an amusement park. Now, this would, again, potentially work against the interests of Six Flags. They just firmly established a monopoly on roller coasters in the Midwest, and they really don't have to give it up to anyone if they don't want to. But since the park doesn't really compete with Great America or Cedar Point on a thrill ride level in any substantial way, it might not be that crazy to think that Six Flags might sell it to someone who will keep buying flat rides, tear down Wolverine Wildcat to avoid that maintenance cost, and keep operating as an independent park. The third scenario is that Six Flags just does nothing to it. Keep everything the way that it is, let it keep making whatever money it's making, hold on to the property, hold on to the assets, let it sit for a season or two longer. Maybe it's not losing the money that Six Flags America was losing. Maybe it's just putting along, and the continued lack of investment in it is because it's not a squeaky enough wheel to get any of the grease. It's hard to say from the outside, but it is plain to see from the outside that Cedar Point and Great America are getting money thrown at them hand over fist, with Wrath of Rakshasa, Siren's Curse, and Top Thrill 2 all opening this season, while Six Flags is perfectly content closing Michigan's Adventure 2 months early with no fanfare. This outcome is, I'd say, just as likely as the first two scenarios, and I'm not sure which of the three likely ones I would rather happen. And then we have my dream scenario, that Six Flags actually invest in the park, brings in a modern attraction or multiple modern attractions over the next few years, and that the new foot traffic makes the place profitable again. When I say modern attraction, I don't mean another flat ride like Ripcord. I mean a whole new roller coaster, or an RMC conversion of Wolverine Wildcat, or, dare I say it, an RMC conversion of Shivering Timbers. I realize how sacrilegious that last one sounds, losing our great CCI Woody and transforming our most iconic roller coaster into something different. But even the most die-hard Shivering Timbers fans would have to admit that the iBox conversion of the coaster would bring in people from across the world to ride. It's commonly held to be among the best out-and-back coasters ever made. That layout with the huge camelbacks, tight helixes, and all that big, wide CCI support structure would make for an insane RMC coaster. If the old Woodies in the park aren't RMC'd, eventually they're going to be 100% Titan tracked anyways. It's just going to take the park 7 seasons to do it. Now, besides an RMC conversion, my dream pick for a future addition to the park will be something that you can't get at either Great America or Cedar Point. Now, both parks have B&M wing coasters. Both parks have big hyper coasters. Shivering Timbers already fills the airtime-heavy out-and-back niche that would be filled by a B&M Giga coaster. I think the least likely option, but the coolest option, would be if Six Flags purchased the first S&S Axis coaster in the U.S. and put it here. At Great America or at Cedar Point, an S&S Axis coaster would be viewed as just another gimmick coaster. But at Michigan's Adventure, it would be an absolute show stealer, a standout coaster. And again, it could reinvigorate the park's attendance in a big way. Barring that, a mock extreme spinner would be a great choice, especially considering the popularity of Time Traveler in Missouri and Ride to Happiness in Belgium. Now again, these mock extreme spinners would barely make a blip at Cedar Point or at Six Flags Great America, And in fact, the concept that they're suggesting for a mock extreme spinner to replace King Ka in New Jersey is causing downright outrage on the internet. But a coaster like that would be a revolution here at our little park, Michigan's Adventure. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see to find out what the future holds. If you enjoyed my video, please consider giving me a like. If you want to see more videos from me, subscribe to my channel. If you think I'm an idiot for enjoying the Thunderhawk, please let me know in the comments. I promise I'll read them all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Vertical Drop Viking out.
Twice the fun, Michigan's Adventure. Twice the fun, wild water adventure. Twice the fun, 2 parks for the price of 1.
Michigan's largest amusement park opens this Saturday. At Michigan's Adventure and Wild Water Adventure, you get 2 parks for the price of 1. There's something for the whole family.
Twice the fun, Michigan's Adventure. Twice the fun.
8 miles north of Muskegon. Russell Road exit off US 31.